Hello, I'm Loren Sederstrom. I'm the host of the All Around Grant Show. And my guest today is Larry Lanou. How you doing, Larry?
Doing great, Loren.
Well, we have a lot of stuff to cover today. But one of the fluff I'm going to give you this week is kind of just cover some of the things I've covered in the last 2.5, 3 years of doing this show. So if Control Room could play that, I'll show you what I've been up to. Hello, I'm Loren Sederstrom, and I'm the host of the All Around Grant Show. Today, okay, there we go. There's the tractor parade that we initiated about 4 years ago. And you can see the citizens of Grant. Here's another picture. It can be big things, small things that we have in there. And Larry, you were also instrumental in that.
Yeah, it's a great community event.
Now this is the Zephyr, which is no longer in operation, but it used to be the dinner train that went from Stillwater out to the middle of Grant and back, and I was on it a number of times. We also did a show on the golf courses of Grant. We have Indian Hills right here, as you can see, and that's a private golf club. It's one of the planned unit developments. There is the clubhouse, very nice place. You can also have dinner there. They close at 10 o'clock, however. That's the first one I did. I also have aerial photos. Loggers Trail is the newest golf course we have, and that's right on Jamaica Avenue there, or Manning Avenue, I'm sorry.
Manning, right.
And there is a picture of it. They're ultimately going to be building a large clubhouse, but now they just have a modular unit in there, and you can get a flavor of what it is. It's a little more rustic. We also did the greenhouses, and one of the 3 greenhouses we did is Costa Farm on 96. And he's got like 12 or 13 large greenhouses. Here's an example. He grows thousands and thousands of flowers and also plants. So you can go there and get almost anything.
The big thing is support your local community, and that's what we're trying to show.
We also went and visited Amott's Apple Orchard, and in there is also St. Croix Vineyards. And there is a picture of the trees blossoming. We did that in the spring, and you can see white apple blossoms as far as you can see. Now we also did the third one, which is Axtall's, and that's on the corner of 12 and Manning. And that is in an old farm that's been around since the 1860s. So that's one of the older buildings, and they have also moved the house and restored that. So that's kind of an interesting bit of history for Grant. We also went out and did Blueberry Fields, which is just a little bit outside of Grant.
And that's why we call it the All Around Grant Show.
Yep. And you can see they have all these different varieties, and this is kind of a family perspective. They have 3, 4, 5-year-old little kids out there out picking blueberries, and it's just a wonderful adventure. They can have a picnic. There we are. We did the tractor parades in front of the town hall, and this is the replica of the town hall that we built, and we're in several parades from the, okay. There I did a special in pumpkins and pine trees. A gentleman out there, John David, raises pumpkins and pine trees, and here's his old restored tractor. Of course, I always do a number of car shows, and here's a picture of a 1956 Ford Thunderbird convertible that was at one of the car shows, and of course you can see the other ones. You heard of the Holidazzle Parade. Well, Grant had their own Holidizzle Parade, and we went around the neighborhoods caroling with this. And here's a picture of, I like every year to go down to Washington County Fairgrounds, and they have the Cutter and Sleigh Parade. Now this is a mini one. Here's a larger one with a team of horses, and it's really kind of a fun thing to go and kind of go back in time and see horses and teams and see what they used to do. This is from the White Bear Lake Parade, Manitou Days.
Manitou Days.
And again, another example of us using the town hall. Trail. And one of the things we're going to be talking about is the Browns Creek extension to the Gateway Trail that's going to go all the way into Stillwater from Highway 96. So come on along and let's see what we can find in All Around Grant. There we go. That's a flavor of my commercial that I'm going to be tweaking a little bit, but it kind of shows some of the things that I've covered in the last few years, and we're always trying to cover some things. Unfortunately, lately there's been a lot of political unrest. We had our first protest in Grant. We've never had before. 75 people showed up at Town Hall. So we always are covering some things. And again, shows continue to evolve, and we try to bring you the important things. We try to keep you current on what's happening in government.
And get our citizens involved and engaged in our city.
So, well, in a kind of hitchhiking on that, one of the things that we've talked about is the school built on a former Superfund site. And Bob Bowcox is the researcher and a person for Erin Brockovich. Now, we taped her on one of the shows at Blueberries and Brockovich, where they're talking about 6 Superfund sites within a mile of each other in Fridley. Well, we've made contact with them, and we currently have a bill in the legislature, 775 in the 957 in the House, that will, in the future, will prohibit any schools being built on a dump site, and if they're within a quarter mile, they have to notify residents. And hopefully we'll get that passed this year. But in the news, some of you may have seen where there was a General Mills a pollution problem down off 18th and Hennepin, their former research facilities, and they used TCE, which is trichlorine ethylide, I believe. I may not have pronounced it right, but it's a cleaning solvent. Well, in 2010, they quit trying to reclaim and pump it out of the groundwater. The plume has since moved, and you know, people, I guess the most important thing about cancer is prevention and awareness. And we have a short clip of Bob Bowcox explaining what TCE is, explaining what the problems. So if control room, if you could run that clip, please.
You're not going to see a whole lot of soil vapor information. So any testing that's being done at this point in time is going to be underestimated as to what's really going on. A little bit of background about PCE and sort of what's been going on is that PCE is a solvent that was used probably to clean machinery and clean parts and to do a lot of different types of manufacturing at the General Mills facility. Then they would use that material and it was being dumped in an unlined pond. That percolated down and got into the groundwater, and the groundwater became the transportation vehicle that brought it underneath the neighborhood. Then once it would go in the soils, because the groundwater would rise and fall and rise and fall and contaminated all the soils underneath the neighborhood. Then they pulled the groundwater back over 25 years, treated that water and discharged it. Treating PCE in water is very easy. You basically put it across the granular activated carbon and that removes the TCE from the water. Or they can airstrip it off, or a little bit of both. The problem is once it gets in the soils, it's going to start breaking down. And it's going to take about 300 years. And even if you went in and did some of the different innovative technologies that are available now, you're still looking at probably 200 or 300 years to remove the TCEs from the soils. The chemicals that it breaks down into naturally in the soils, vinyl chloride, is much more toxic than the TCE itself. And one of the things that I have concerns about in the TCE soil vapor testing that they're doing now is we don't see data that indicates that they're testing for these breakdown chemicals. And so those are some of the things we're going to be talking to the state about and talking to BAR Engineering that's doing the testing. Those of you that are aware, I mean, most of you are aware, 2 lawsuits have been filed. Both of them are class action lawsuits. For some reason, people feel that it's important, you know, it's sort of like, you know, first one out the gate. I don't understand that concept. We'll talk to you a little bit about those types of lawsuits where class actions are brought, because class actions represent each of you as equals. You're called similarly affected or similarly impacted. And the problem that I have with those is your house is different than his house. Your impacts are all different and you're all unique individuals. Even within the same house, the individuals in the home are going to be impacted differently. So I don't think that a class action lawsuit is appropriate to get on file. And we can answer questions about that as well. So what I'd like to do is everyone in the room, I'm assuming, is predominantly from the neighborhood that's affected.
There we go. Well, he's explained a number of very important things. First of all, that came out in this meeting down there, they're testing for TCEs, and it's a gas or thing. It goes into a plume. Okay. Unfortunately, it doesn't travel through the ground terribly well when it's frozen. It usually follows disturbed areas such as the sewer pipes coming in, the gas pipes, the underground electric. And they're doing testing in the winter when there's a minimal amount of movement. So the testing won't be accurate. The other thing I wanted to point out is how these corporations try to limit their liability. Okay, let's say Larry and I both were affected by one of these plumes. His wife ends up with a cough and a sneeze, and my family ends up with 4 cases of cancer. In a class action lawsuit, everybody gets the same, say, $5,000. And that's the point he was making. If you go at an individual basis, if you're stricken with cancer, you can get medical costs. Everybody isn't considered equal, and that's the problem with the class action lawsuit. So that was something else that corporations use to limit their liability. The sad thing is in 2010, they quit pumping the TCEs out and reclaiming them. So there's a problem here, there's a liability, and they don't always tell you what you need to know, because corporations, remember, their goal is to maximize profit. So obviously the flip side of that is minimizing liabilities and payouts, and so that's a little bit on the sneaky side what they're doing. One of the other points he made is they only test for a couple things, like they're testing for TCE. Well, as he said, the more poisonous thing is what it breaks down to is polyvinyl. They're not testing for that, folks. So you have to be real careful. There's about 80,000 chemicals people can test for. Obviously they can't test for everything. But many times, as we found out on this site for the new Wildwood School, they're not testing for a lot of things, and things are oozing up, and they're not being honest and open with the public. The Minnesota Pollution Control Agency is more interested in guarding their own tail feathers than providing information. As we said before, the health department and the MPCA would not allow you to build a house on that site. However, you can build a school. And they say, well, that's because they're not there 365. Well, what about the janitors that work there? What about the teachers that are there year after year? And
Loren, I liken it to if you were putting time in service in the military and you had a 2-year hitch or a 4-year hitch in the military and you got sent over to Vietnam and you only worked and handled Agent Orange for 2 months out of that 4 years. Were you exposed? It's not the duration of the exposure, it's the fact that you actually were exposed. And so one other thing I'd like to bring to the top is in that tape you met Bob Bowcox. Now this over in the neighborhood, over in southeast Como neighborhood, just came about recently. I want you to be aware that Erin Brockovich and her staff try whenever possible to get out and prevent exposure to cancerous environments. I know a little over, probably 2 years ago, I was in a conference call with the governor's office and the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, and they asked me, what is Erin Brockovich's interest in the Wildwood Elementary School? And I explained it to the governor's office as it's simple. I said, she'd rather be recognized for preventing an illness than allowing one to happen. And that's been their policy all along. They're not here to bring down governments and businesses. What they are doing is to create awareness, and so that early detection, if you are exposed to something, that you're aware of it, and it just, somebody comes down with cancer, it's a lot easier to find it in the early stages than the later stages. So, well,
I taped that whole process. It was about a 2-hour meeting we're at, and one woman raised her hand, and she lived there 40 years and had 4 different types of cancer. Well, if you don't get cancer, that's fine. But if they come with some piddly $5,000 settlement and you've got $200,000 worth of cancer treatments, it isn't going to do any good. By the way, they have doubled the price of some of it was just on the news here this last week, they've doubled the price of some of these medicines, that they're charging. So this one poor woman has to cost her $100,000 a year for her cancer treatment and she's going bankrupt. By the way, in Europe, a lot of these pharmaceutical companies, the things they make sell for half of what they do here. So remember, there's also a little diabolical money scheme on there. But now we have to transition. We just wanted to bring you that and show you that. We were one of 5 and 11 stations were down there filming also. And I watched the news, and there was maybe a 10-second clip. They got nothing out. But again, it's awareness, folks, and that's what we're trying to provide you with, to make you aware of some of the problems. But now we're shifting gears, and we're going to be talking about the city of Grant, which is one of our favorite topics. And, you know, about a year ago, a year ago, they got rid of the Planning Commission. Oh, there's nothing for them to do. Well, basically, that's because Mayor Carr didn't like to hear what the Planning Commission said. There were several contractors on there and knowledgeable individuals. And he wants somebody that rubber stamps whatever he wants. He thinks he's the king of the OK Corral. So they're talking about putting in a new, someone came forward and wants to put in a country club, he's called. Well, it really isn't a country club. It doesn't fit any of the ordinances. So we'll start this out with Mayor Carr explaining on this next clip about this, this new petition to put in a country club.
Perfectly clear in our ordinances that fits Ed exactly, in my opinion. We were lacking some definitions of things in there. So I think Ed is looking for which way to go with his application. I think we all agreed that we pretty much like the concept plan of what Ed was trying to do. We're just trying to figure out a good way to put it forward in the best way so that he doesn't have to waste time, money, and energy chasing something that maybe is more difficult than it needs to be. So with that, I'll just open it up to Ed.
Okay, folks. Well, that's interesting. It's what we like and what we don't like. That's why we have ordinances, to maintain equity. It isn't if you have blue eyes, you come in and you get whatever permit you want, and if you have brown eyes, too bad, folks, you don't get the permit. It isn't about liking. It's about ordinances and applying them uniformly and fairly. That's called equity. Okay, well, he kind of opened this can of worms up and is talking about that. Oh, we like it. Well, great. I'm glad he likes it. Now we have our planner, Jennifer Haskamp, come in, and she tries to sift through this and find something, and let's find what her professional opinion is.
As we discussed at the last meeting, there's a couple of uses in our use table today that could accommodate the type of use that he's looking for. Of course, the issue, which the mayor just indicated, is that there's no real strong definitions with those specific uses. So the uses that today would be allowed under a conditional use permit would be a country club or a club, lodge / type of use, or commercial recreation, I think is the third one. So those are essentially the three that would be allowed today with a conditional use permit as the use table is laid out today. There's been quite a bit of discussion, I know, with respect to a supper club or that type of use. That currently is not permitted in the A2 zoning district. Therefore, there would have to be an amendment to the text in order for that to be an allowed use. So those are basically the options. If you're looking for a use that is approvable today without any changes to the ordinances, it's one of the first three. Otherwise, you look at a conditional use permit change, essentially, with a supper club or a similar type of use to that. So.
Okay. Nick, do you want to address anything before we move on to Steve's question?
Well, the difficult aspect of all of this is the lack of definitions. I mean, if you're, as Jennifer indicated, if you're looking for an easy resolution, it's not there because your code doesn't define all of these terms. And so then the question becomes, what is a country club? What is a lodge? What is commercial recreation? And to that extent, you're sort of bound to make a determination based upon the plain meaning of those words. And so, could Mr. Schmidt apply for a CUP for a country club? Sure. He's going to he'll have the burden of proving to the council that his use then fits within the commonly accepted term that is the country club. Or if he decides to apply for a club, lodge, or a commercial recreation, he's going to have the burden through his application to then prove that what he's planning to do out there fits with what we would commonly associate with those terms. We don't have the luxury of going back to the code to say he meets all these requirements that are specified in the code, because they're just not there. So as Jennifer indicated, you've got 3 options at this point if you want to file an application. And if you want to file an application under those uses, the council will have to take that up. If the council thinks that it should be some other use that's not currently permitted in the district, then the zoning code would have to be modified first. If the council thinks it would be more beneficial to have definitions and to specifically define what a country club is or what a lodge is, you can certainly take the opportunity to amend your code to provide for some definitions. It's sort of difficult to know how you would define these things without actually knowing what the proposal is.
There we go. It's kind of interesting. They're getting this professional feedback, and because they like something, they're ready to go in and jump and change. And the interesting thing is, the last few ordinance changes, they're supposed to publish it. Well, they're getting really sloppy and sneaky. What they publish is we're modifying ordinance 13-09, which means 2013-0, whatever what would be hypothetically. And if you want to see the text, you can see it in the city offices. They're supposed to be publishing the whole change. Now, they did this with the Planning Commission change, and of course they have to have a public hearing, folks. And they said, we're just going from 9 commissioners to 7, which was true, but they also changed other wording in it, saying that rather that the Planning Commission should not give opinions to the City Council, they should only deal with those things as directed by the City Council, which is a profound change. In other words, the City Council...
They took out the word initiative, which is very important in our City Council. As you'll see going through here today, we speak as one voice. And if your voice isn't in sync with the mayor's, you will not be allowed to speak. You will see that we have disbanded the Planning Commission altogether. If we're talking about text change, ordinance change, there's not one person sitting on our City Council that is taking a Planning 101 course. Yet they are the ones determining text changes, planning, zoning, and unfortunately, we had a very good Planning Commission with 7 to 9 members, and they all worked. They had different expertise on the Planning Commission. It was a no cost to the city. They worked as volunteers. It created a little bit of community spirit out there, and but then again, they spoke with a different voice than what the mayor wanted to hear. So now we no longer have a Planning Commission, which we hope to address through the Charter Commission.
Of course, it isn't all bad, Larry, because a couple of members have actually looked in the code book, so they know what's in there. So I guess there's a silver lining.
We forced them to pick up the code book finally.
Well, the next clip we have is of one of our newer members that just got elected, Tina, and she talks about this. So if we could run the next clip, please.
Last night for quite a while, and I was trying to figure out the difference between a golf course / country club and then supper club. And the thing that I didn't mention last night was we had briefly talked about how the country clubs were, when you thought of it's usually coincides with golf, right? It doesn't have to, but there are the 2 golf clubs, country clubs, that do have, their CUP say that you have to close with alcohol and whatever at 10. And you told me last night that you would like to be able to serve by the state regulations,
Right.
which is 1, and have a full kitchen, which the country club / golf course, they don't have that. They're not allowed that in the CUP. The newer ones are not allowed that in their CUP. They have to close at 10 o'clock for alcohol.
Now, is that,
That's in the CUP.
that's
Them.
their CUP 20 years ago?
Exactly. So, but the problem that I have is, so if we were to call this a country club, then you, by me, would have to be put under the same rules as a CUP for another similar business. So that's why I was thinking if you did go ahead with like a club or supper club, and we do a text amendment to okay that for the A2, I mean, if you had supper club, it wouldn't have to include all your sports. You could do whatever you want with your sports and stuff outside and still have something called a supper club and do what you want to do. Or you could possibly serve the alcohol until 1 and have a kitchen. Because if we give you a country club and then give you the CUP for that, we would have to be consistent, give you the same rules as the others.
There we go. Well, I think it's very interesting that they have said that. You notice a text change. Well, the text change just isn't a text change. A text change is, in fact, an ordinance change. And it is a big deal. It isn't a little deal. You shouldn't be tweaking the ordinances, going through that whole process for every person that comes along. You're already going to find out that supper clubs in a later clip that are not allowed in A1 and A2 categories. But
A good example, Lauren, and we spoke about this before, none of those sitting on that council have taken a planning course. So they're making up the stuff as they go along. So one thing about the planning commission, they were able to sit through a body, make recommendations to the city council. I don't know that any of them ever really picked up a code book and researched it enough, because as you'll see, if I come in and make an application for stables or some other activity, my circumstances are going to be different than the one you issued 20 years ago. It has to be relevant to what you're looking at.
Well, I had to get a CUP, and one of the interesting things was, you know, after I spent the $3,000 and got the CUP, they changed it. You know, they said if you board horses, you have to have a CUP. Well, if it's 1 or 2 horses, you know, well, why do they poop different than regular horses? I don't know. As long as I'm within the code, you know, I can have 21 horses in my property, and I only have 12 to 15. What's the issue? But oh no. Well, then after that, they changed it a couple of years later. Oh, you can board up to 10 horses without a CUP. Well, great. I just dropped $3,000 going through that. But anyway, it's going to be interesting with the level of expertise of these individuals, because the next clip we have is the city attorney disagreeing with what Ms. Loben has said.
The apprentice councilman.
Yep. So if we could do the next clip, please.
Bit with Councilmember Loben's comments, in that you need to take every application on its face and consider the facts and circumstances that arise with respect to that particular application. Not every situation is the same. Obviously, the conditional use permits for the 2 golf courses were issued 20 years ago, 10 years ago.
Let me interject that. The one for Applewood was 94, and there was actually an amendment done to the Loggers Trail Sawmill. That was done in actually 2007, and it was actually, the original one was in 2004. So they're not.
Well, and I appreciate that clarification, but the bottom line is that your conditions have to bear a reasonable nexus to the facts and circumstances that are presented with respect to the application. So to say that for every business that is of a certain type, you're going to have the same conditions, it's not possible to do that, because some are going to present greater traffic issues, some are going to present greater safety issues. You know, the golf courses may not be required to serve, or may not be allowed to serve past 10, because by 10 o'clock it's dark, and the bar area doesn't have anything to do with the golf course. They're not intending to keep a bar open all night. And so you really have to consider the facts and circumstances of each particular application, and your application of conditions does not have to be uniform. And in fact, I would say that it can't be uniform, because if it were uniform, then your decision would really be fairly arbitrary and capricious, and you'd simply be saying the same set of conditions have to apply to every business utilizing this particular use classification. And that would then take away your judgment in reviewing all the facts associated with a particular application. So I think you've got to review every one that comes in. You've got to apply the test as to what's good for the health, safety, and welfare of the residents of the city. And does it make sense to keep closing hours for all establishments that serve liquor at 10 o'clock? It may, but you have to have a rationale for doing that. And if you don't have a rationale for doing that, and the request is that he be entitled to serve until 1 o'clock. Well, you've got to have a reason to justify requiring a condition where, or imposing a condition where he's required to close at 10 o'clock.
Jeff, thank you.
There we go. It's really interesting. There's a couple points I want to make with this. One is, remember he used the term arbitrary and capricious? How curious is that? Because a few years ago they lost a lawsuit where the judge said the city of Grant, in pursuing a person with a horseboarding operation, the city of Grant acted in an arbitrary and capricious manner. They were suing this person because she supposedly had four too many animals for her conditional use permit, and the city lost, and they were going to appeal it, but they finally pulled that back. But the other thing is, the other thing that's very interesting about this, you think that the city council would be listening to their own legal advice.
I think we think with one mind, and part of the reason we're thinking with one mind is we had 3 realtors or people that in that field. So they think with one mind. We don't have the diversity on that city council we should have.
Well, plus we'll get into that, but it's really interesting. The next clip we have is of Jeff Huber. Scott was kind of the third man out there and was being ignored, and now that focus is shifting. So if we could play the next clip, please.
He's out there under the country club designation. It's my understanding we've never had a CUP under a country club because there is no definition, correct?
To my knowledge, that's
Right.
correct.
Okay, thanks. Do they say country club on them?
What are you looking at?
Oh, no, golf club and company. That is
Yeah.
not under the country club classification because we don't have a description for country club.
Right, but, well, and we don't have a definition for country club
That answers my
because
question.
it comes after golf course on our list. So it says golf course and country club because, in my opinion, they're the same thing. It's a golf course with a country club.
In my opinion, they're different. A country club, if we go 5 miles down the road to Delwood Country Club, they've got multiple tennis courts, they've got swimming pools, and they have golf. The Whitebear Yacht Club could be very much considered a country club under all standard definitional criteria. I would find it hard to believe that would not be a country club. It has golf, it has yachting facilities, it has a pool, it has tennis courts. What Mr. Schmidt is proposing to us here is simply put a country club. And to change zoning in order to classify him as a supper club because there's some nebulous connection with other previously issued CUPs, and because the conditions of his CUP may disadvantage them in some way, shape, or form, they are free to come back before this council and petition us to make their CUP one that does not disadvantage them in their mind. So offering Mr. Schmidt a CUP under the country club definition allows us to come forward with a country club definition, allows us not to change our zoning, allows what we have all agreed according to the minutes last month is an excellent use for the property. So this is getting far too complicated, I think, and it's getting too complicated for no reason that I can really ascertain. If these other companies or other CUPs feel as though they are not being treated fairly, again, they can come right back in, and the punishment of other CUPs has nothing to do with offering Mr. Schmidt a CUP that fits within the zoning where he's proposing the use. I'm confused at all this. I should have seen a CUP application this month, and I'm confused that Mr. Schmidt is standing in front of us again with this when the country club that he is proposing fits the zoning. We should have an application in front of us.
Okay, well, let me.
Well, that's interesting. I kind of hate to admit it, but that was an excellent analysis. I have to give the man credit where credit's due. He went through it completely. Of course, the problem is now he's not a Tom Carr bobblehead.
Yeah, he's thinking for himself, and he's got to be dangerous because he'll be left out in the cold. He ran his team, Tom, Tina, and Jeff. And I think you're going to see here that by speaking out against the mayor, he will be in the same position Scott Fogelson was when he left, useless to the mayor, and
Wasn't Scott stripped of the deputy mayor? He was the most senior person.
Yep.
And he was put on in January, and in February, our mayor said, well, I'd just rather have Jeff because he thinks the same way I do.
Well, it's obviously they're not thinking along the same grounds. And in all fairness, Jeff spoke very eloquently. He spoke with knowledge, and I'm going to give him credit for that because he does, because he had the background of serving on the Planning Commission for 3 years. The other 4 councilmen sitting there have never sat in that function on the Planning Commission, so they're making decisions without the knowledge behind him. And as you can see, the knowledge that Jeff gained by sitting on that Planning Commission was very valuable, very knowledgeable, and that is the training ground. If you're considering running for a city council, you should try to get in, work on a Planning Commission, understand the bylaws, the ordinances.
It's kind of like going from the minor leagues to the major leagues.
Yeah,
essentially.
that's where you get the people involved in your community. You can see just by listening to Jeff that he spoke very well with knowledge. And the other good example, and you'll see that coming up with Dave Tronrud, he's just going to basically lived in our community for a year, has never had any of this background. So his job is simply to nod his head and agree with the mayor. And they're making the decisions without the education. And so I want to thank Jeff for speaking up, because he didn't have to speak up. He just disagreed with the mayor on principle. Actually, he disagreed on him because of his knowledge and background that the Planning Commission offers. They do offer a planning courses for the planning commissioners, none of which the other 4 on the council have taken.
Well, we're now going to hear from the new appointed council person. This is the guy that flips houses with the mayor. He's been in the city for less than a year, and rather than put Dan Potter back on, who has 3 years experience in the planning commission, 4 years experience in the city council, they
and doesn't live 5 houses away.
They threw this guy back on and railroaded, and that's part of what the protest came about. So if we could play that next very short clip, please.
I like the idea of the business. I agree with Tom and Tina in the respect that there is no use that fits perfectly that we currently have.
Okay, bobblehead number 2.
Yep. See, I agree with Tom and Tina. Now it's Tom, Tronrud, Tina, and Tom. So, Jeff, I hope you're feeling what Scott Fogelson sat out there and felt. You're now one of the oddballs out, but you did speak very well on the issue. I hope your voice can be
Well, we will be hearing again. It's going to be an interesting contrast, because the next clip we have is with both Tina and Jeff. So, control room, if we could play that.
The whole failure thing, I do not want you to fail.
Thank you.
I don't know where you guys are trying to pigeonhole me with assuming that I want him to fail, because I want him to succeed, or I wouldn't have spent 3 hours today going through the zoning book and all the other stuff to try to find a way that fits him to succeed. So he doesn't have to come back and forth and change things. So that's what I want to say first off. My personal opinion, I think you'd be better off going with a supper club for your future use. Just like you said, you wanted to do maybe lunches too and stuff.
If things pan out great.
So that's my opinion. I'm definitely for you doing this. I think it's a phenomenal idea and a great spot for it. I think it should be called some kind of a club, I guess, versus pigeonholing you into the country club thing. I guess it's a club too, but I don't know.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
To my knowledge, none of our other country club golf courses have anything but golf courses on them. You're obviously set apart as a country club. A casual observer can see you have other, or are planning other athletic facilities in addition to golf. So developing a country club definition for that and incorporating some of the concerns of the other council members, I think would be the way to go with that. I don't think you fit the country club, or the golf course mold. I would prefer to see the council buckle down and write a good definition for country clubs in this case. So that's what I would advise.
Once again, I think you can see Jeff is a poster child for the need for a planning commission. He's taken that 3 years of knowledge and experience versus Tina says, I picked up the ordinance book today and I think here's where you fit. Folks, pay attention. We no longer have a planning commission because our mayor disbanded the complete planning commission and brought his city planner, the one he says, I like to work with, when we had a very good, reputable planner in place. But it didn't fit Tom's mold.
What was very interesting, too, is if you recall back a couple Januaries ago, one of the things they had charged me with was impersonating a planning commissioner when I was on the planning commission. And by statute, if they bring you up and those have that type of hearing, which I had my attorney there and she did an excellent job, they have to publish the findings. They have yet to publish the findings from their little witch hunt, which by statute is required. So it kind of depends. It's kind of like being down at the OK Corral. Whoever's got the loaded six shooter is the guy that's going to win, you know. So that's kind of interesting. And I just wanted to point that out. Like I said, we had a very good planning commission. They didn't rubber stamp everything that the mayor wanted. And I don't know why he thinks he can run the city. This isn't a fiefdom. It's not a kingdom.
Although, Loren, I want to go back to you. You've been put on a planning commission. I've served on a planning commission. As you interview with everybody, the last one that interviews you is Tom Carr. And his only statement is in the interview, do you understand? I put you on this committee, I can take you off. And it had nothing, he never asked me my experience, my credentials. He just wanted to make sure we knew that if we do not agree with him, you will be removed.
Well, that was the interesting thing, too. He said, well, I explained to him that I had advisory committees as a DECA coordinator and served on many of them. And I said I knew how they functioned. And he said, well, you know, that I served at Leisure. And he says, well, do you think you could work with us? And I said, well, I certainly could. I said, the last 6 years I was in special ed, so I can work with you guys, too. So, of course, the audience got kind of a kick out of that, and we went forward. But it's interesting going on this planning thing. Let's talk about these A1 and A2 partials, because that is an important thing, the zoning, what they're zoned for. So if we could play the next clip, please.
Yes, I did do it both for A1 and A2, so that I had both those numbers for you this evening. In the A1 district, which is obviously what is being proposed this evening, it came up with approximately 35 plus or minus parcels that would meet those two conditions. So that's less than 2% of all the parcels within the community. If it were in A1 and A2, both, it jumps to about 89. So it does obviously incorporate significantly more if you were to broaden it to both A1 and A2. But again, those parcels also included like the golf courses, for example. So I didn't go into the detail of figuring out exactly how many of those would come out also, but that gives you a ballpark of how many parcels it would affect.
So that's the planner once again, and she's determining how many A1 and A2 parcels, which normally, for the audience so they understand, those are larger agricultural plots, like 20, 40, 60, 80, 200 acres. And there still are some active farms out in the city of Grant. I know I have a little 43-acre farm that's actively farmed, and there's a lot of ground around me. Crabtree's up the road have 120. There's so there is some. It is rural and agricultural, and it's got some charm. Out east, they've really developed that quite well, and it's called ag tourism. And we have, like I said, pine trees and pumpkins. We've got apple orchards. We've got greenhouses, and there's a lot of destination type of things out there, and it really is a lot of charm. And according to the comprehensive plan through 2030, that's what it's designated at. And the comprehensive plan is set out by the Met Council, which is a governing unit over the 5-county metro area that plans out for 20 or 30, 40 years, so the development is coordinated. And so what the next clip that I have is going to be Joyce Wielander, who their family has been involved. They've been involved in city government for 40, 50 years. She was a 4-H leader for 50 years. And why don't we hear what she has to say about this? So if we could play the next clip, please.
83rd Street. I have a notice, I saw it in the paper, and it says A1, and you're talking about A2 tonight.
We can't have a discussion, Joyce, this is a public hearing, or can we, a little bit?
Well, this says, I'm just
I would
asking,
just, yeah, it's A1, that's what they applied for.
but you were all talking about A2
Well,
tonight.
well, that's our first chance to talk about it, that's when we saw it, that's all we said.
So it's confusing to us, the public.
Okay? There are applications for A1, Joyce, not A2.
It is. Well, you were all referring to A2 tonight on this. Does this conform to our comp plan? Is a question I have. Tom, you wouldn't remember, but in the past, there's been 2 proposals in this area. One was for a stable where people could bring their horses, buy a loaf of bread at this place that they were going to make, and that was turned down. I was on planning commission at that time, and I was at the county meeting, and the Met Council was there, and they said they did not want leapfrog development. So this proposal tonight would be what they call leapfrog development, because it's putting it out in the center of Grant, whereas if it's considered more of a commercial, our commercial, and others, if you look at the map, is Highway 36, where we have all that traffic. So, from the comp plan, which you must have, it mentions in there that Grant has been designated as, in 1970, in the comp plan, as a permanent rural designation. So therefore, and if you look at the uses, some of the uses you were talking about, and I pulled out the uses, and I was on the planning commission at that time, some of those things, such as a supper club, I have it here somewhere. Someone was looking at it back there. Supper club is a no in all the uses. It's designated, and we went through, as the planning commission, through all the uses, and all the colors were changed, and that's what I presently have. And I don't know that any of them have not been followed. It also says that, and you were talking about A1 and A2, Ordinance 54C puts A1 and A2 together as not, well, you said previously, not much differences. But supper clubs, definitely in here has a no all the way across in all the zones. Churches, of course.
Okay, that was Joyce Wielander, and she's been in this community for many, many years, and her husband was on the town board for 35 years. So someone that's very knowledgeable.
Actually, Lauren, if I could interject, if you listen to her, she's somebody who has served on the planning commission, has a little knowledge and background. So I go back to the statement that I hope the charter commission can straighten out, bring a planning commission back to our city. It is a training ground so that you don't just get, you don't start your apprenticeship sitting at the city
No.
council. Yeah. I
You
think
get a
the
learner's
planning-
permit before you get a driver's license.
And I think that it's a no cost to the city. I think our mayor was simply out of bounds when he disbanded that commission.
Well, let's go on to because this is what we're going to be talking about in the next clip, is the planning commission.
Avenue. I've seen this couple come up here several months ago, start making application inquiries about exactly what they want to do. We're advised on a text amendment. Ed Schmidt's been here for the last 2 months now talking, and right now we have a city council that's sitting here making all these decisions. You disbanded a planning commission in February. These are some of the things the planning commission were designed to be put in for. I think it was a wrong move to disband the planning commission. You said you didn't have enough applications out there and uses for them to do it. And truth of the matter is, we were asking as a planning commission to continue our planning commission meetings, sit down or read and review our ordinances. It was a no cost to the city. The planning commission didn't cost anything. We had it taped,
Larry, this is a
rebroadcast.
public hearing on this text amendment, if you could get
Yep,
to
this
that.
text amendment is exactly what I'm talking about. These people didn't have the opportunity to come in front of a planning commission. You could have had your city council meeting, and 2 weeks later, they could be in front of a planning commission talking about it. You would have had the ability to listen to the input from the citizens from the planning commission going forward. I believe there's probably only...
You have a comment on the actual amendment before us?
Absolutely. It
Well, then,
should
can you
be
get to that,
sitting in
please?
front of a planning commission.
We're not talking
There is
about
not
that.
one person up here that has taken a planning 101 course, and Jeff, I believe you're the only one sitting in our council that's actually sat on a planning commission before.
Larry-
You know the va-
Okay, that takes care of that. We're finishing up the planning commission. Now we have to zing on so we can get things on. Now, you had talked about the charter commission, and of course, Tom Carr was against the charter commission. He thought he was going to load it up and get it salted away with all his cronies. The judge wisely saw it wasn't that way. And then after the first meeting, you had a meet and greet, as I understand, at the Guest House, and right away he started saying it's a violation of
Open meeting.
Open meeting, and he's trying to put as many speed bumps in the parking lot of the life of the planning commission. He won't even let us meet in the town hall. So if we could, he's getting questioned, in the next clip, he's getting questioned on who sent the information to the attorney. So if we could play that control room.
You directed our attorney, Nick Vivian, because we are a weak mirror system. You have no more authority than any other council member, except for in very limited positions. Who directed Nick to spend the money writing 3 or 4 different legal opinions and letters? Was that a council vote or direction, or was he directed by one person to write those letters?
No one directed Nick. Nick got copies of all the stuff that was going on with the Charter Commission, and Nick decided what he was going to do that. All issues go to him, I'm not an attorney.
All right,
So-
how did he get the copies?
Uh,
Who
what-
gave him the copies?
When I was at the last meeting and said you can't send roundabout emails to all the people, and then you started voting online, which is, as a public body, you can't vote, you need to vote in front of everybody like we're doing here. When that happened, I didn't know what to do. I sent the letters or the emails to Nick and said, what do I do with this? I'm not an attorney. And Nick decided what he needed to do.
All right.
Yep.
You know, here we are again, back where we started. And I tell you, I'm not a lawyer, but I know there's the letter of the law, there's the intent of the law, there's the interpretation of the law, and there are opinions. And all we've had so far is a lot of opinions. And in the meantime, that's gotten in the way of our doing our job. All of this could have been put to rest or never come up had we had our own city hall available for our meetings as well as recording broadcasting. It all comes back to that act on the part of the city council.
Original sin is what I think of it. But
Original sin, yeah.
I thought that was put very plain. Now we're going to continue with the same theme with one of of course, we have public comment at the Charter Commission, not we, I'm just an observer. But we had a citizen come up and make a comment. So if we could play the next clip, please.
I think where I get frustrated is the games that are being played. The games between the Charter Commission and the City Council. I think that, you get signs, and we got a city attorney saying they can't pay for it. Well, we all know the Tom's doing the stoppage of that. The donation, I paid the $100 so you guys could meet here. Then I'm called and told, you can't do it the way you did it. Why don't you just take the $100 to Monomedi itself, which our attorney said you can't do. and then he reversed himself to our city
Yeah,
treasurer.
we'll probably-
So all I'm hearing from everybody is games. Let's get down to doing some business here. Either you're gonna have a charter or you're not. And I would rather see you work on a charter than to sit here and talk about minutes and whether these are right or wrong and all this little minutia stuff that doesn't make any sense. And like Bill said, you've been in business for 5 months, and Tom, you got offended because the city of Grant's name was in the city of Stillwater's charter. Who cares? We're here to get a job done and have the citizens decide whether or not you're gonna have a charter or we're not gonna have a charter. It's up to the citizens eventually. Not 9 of you, it's everyone in Grant, so they can vote on it. And if you're not in favor of one, then get off of it. If you are, then let's move on. But let's get going on something.
Well, I thought that was pretty well put, and you can see from the documentation that obviously Tom Carr is doing everything he can to slow this thing and stop it, you know.
Well,
And I guess
I'd like
what
to
happened
bring
in
you up-
Cottage Grove was they stacked the planning commission with the cronies from the city, and after 3 years, when the furor broke down, and they did it the hard way, they got the petition with the 2,000 signatures, and then they requested, the city people requested theirs on there, and so they could kill it 3 years later when the furor broke down. Now, the judge was the same judge. He saw this and figured, we're not going to do a replay of this one. So they kind of gave us the elevator by petitioning the court. Then Tom says, well, we didn't petition the court. Well, yeah, the city attorney did, but he's even denying that. So this is kind of a circus, folks. We're trying to keep you updated on it, what's going on. And I'm not on the Charter Commission, but Larry is. And
Just to give a little clarification here, Loren, when Tom Carr says that everybody was sending emails and voting on stuff back and forth, the emails that were being sent forward were simply because now that we're not allowed to meet in our own city hall, and because at the Gast House the lighting wasn't good, the ability to tape wasn't very good. So instead of meeting on Monday nights, the emails going back saying that Matamidi only had Thursday nights available. The emails going around were, could you meet on the third Thursday? And if we had a majority of the people that could meet there, we could schedule with the city of Matamidi.
So it wasn't policy, it was
wasn't
scheduling.
policy, it was.
And the League of Minnesota Cities came out, and didn't they address that issue about scheduling?
Absolutely. So that is not you have the ability to disseminate information out. A good example, we looked the other night on the charter, and if we want to look at, and folks, we are going to have initiative, referendum, and recall on our charter, along with public comment. We are making great strides to move forward. But Mr. Carr said, well, I can put together some information from for initiative, referendum, and recall, and send it all out to you by email, but we can't all be sending out emails. And I try to make the point that if you take it upon yourself to send your position on that, you are sending one opinion out. I think we should all be able to look at the same document, whether it's initiative, referendum, recall, or another policy. We're all intelligent people, and if we have information that's worthy, we could send that out to the other people without violating an open meeting law. We're simply disseminating information. When we stop and say, did you get that brochure, and here's how I want to vote, or put this part of it in,
Well, we have to
that
wrap
is a
it
little
up.
different.
We're getting down to a minute. By the way, one of the attorneys on the board said he would defend anyone for free that was charged with violating the open meeting law. So that's very important. Thank you, Larry, for coming on. Next month now, we're going to have a little bit different fluff. I'm going to have when it was still warm outside, I went and interviewed a citizen in Grant. A part of Grant is so you can come out and pursue your own dreams. This man's particular dream was having his own go-kart track, and we're going to have an interview with him in kind of capturing the part of his youth again, because that's what he did when he was a kid. So if next month we'll have that to look forward to. We'll also have more pieces of what's going on. And again, I always try to keep you appraised of what's happening in all around Grant. Hopefully we'll have some other information for you. So Thanks for joining us, and come join us again so we can see in what's happening in all around Grant.